Hey y'all, Leela with mskisskreations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial, I'll be showing you how I created these glittered Northern Lights tumblers. Like always, all of my materials will be listed in my description below, including some direct links and coupon codes. And don't forget to follow me on all of my socials, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. For these tumblers, I am using a 12-ounce mug from Makerflow Crafts. They will be linked in my description below. I first sand this tumbler with a 180 grit sanding block, and since it does have a handle, I take sanding paper and I sand the inside of the handle with the sanding paper. This allows me to get all the nooks and crannies. I then wipe this down with my 91% alcohol before applying my design to the tumbler. So this is a glitter tumbler. I am going to add my glitter from Glitter Heart Co. I am using the colors Luna and Big Ben. And then for my adhesive for my glitter, I am adding Adhesive Apothecary. This is a paint, primer, and adhesive. I am using Ghosted and then Like My Soul. I am using some paint brushes I purchased from Adhesive Apothecary as well to apply the paint onto the tumbler. I was running low with Ghosted, so that's why you see me taking the top off and I'm trying to get all of the paint from the bottle. So I first apply the white paint to the center of the tumbler. This does not have to be perfect. As you can see, I am not trying to make this a perfect line or anything. I'm just trying to have some white paint around the center of the tumbler. And when I'm finished applying the white paint around the center or the middle of the tumbler, I then apply my Like My Soul, which is my black paint, to the top and the bottom. I am using the same paintbrush, I believe. I just washed it. It was a little wet, but it doesn't matter. And then once I apply the paints to the top and the bottom, that's when I'm going in with my glitter. So again, this paint is not only a paint, it's a primer and adhesive. So this is what we are using to apply the glitter to the tumbler. I do have a 10% off code for my glitter and adhesive apothecary. It is Miss Kiss, and those links and that coupon code will also be linked in my description below. So like I said, once the paint is all applied to the tumbler, I'm starting off with my lightest color, which is my white or my Luna. And then I'm applying that to the white area of the tumbler. If that does get on the black area, that's okay. You're not going to really see it because white over black blends pretty easily. And then I'm applying my black to the bottom. I chose a holographic black. This has every color of the rainbow in it, so it has that nice shift whenever you move the tumbler. And then I made sure to apply that all around the tumbler where the black was. Once I was finished applying these glitters, I went outside and I sprayed my tumbler with an acrylic sealer. I use Krylon triple thick glaze. There it is. I usually use my acrylic coating, but this is all I had on hand. I will have these linked in my description as well. I let that dry for about 15 to 20 minutes before applying my epoxy to my tumbler. I'm using Flynn Sister Supply Shop epoxy. I do have a 10% off code, Miss Kiss. Again, her website and that code will be linked in my description below. So since I have a cup with a handle, I turn off my cup turner and I put my handle upright, and then I apply that epoxy to the handle first. Once that epoxy is applied to the handle, then I turn on my cup turner and I apply my epoxy to the tumbler just as I would any other tumbler. If you notice that black glitter is going towards the white glitter, so it's mixing, I usually use my Krylon Crystal Clear acrylic coating, but like I said, I didn't have that on hand. So I was really disappointed in this moment, but at the end of the tutorial, you'll see that that really blends together, and I actually like the fact that the black was blending with the white, so it worked out in the end. I'm using Flynn Sister Supply Shop Fast Set Epoxy, so this tumbler took about 4 hours to be completely dried and cured before moving on to the next step. Make sure to follow your epoxy's instructions whenever you're applying your epoxy to your tumblers. My epoxy is completely cured on my tumbler. I'm now going in with my X-Acto knife and I'm cutting and trimming the rim of my tumbler to remove any of that excess epoxy that may have been cured on the rim, just to make my final cleanup process a little easier. So now this is the fun part. We are going to add some inks to the tumbler. Make sure you have your station set up. I am grabbing every type of material I have on hand to add some inks to the tumbler. So I have my sponges, some paint brushes, and a sponge brush. I also have this little air thingy majobber that I will have linked in my description below to move around the inks. And I have my 91% alcohol. These are the inks that I'm using. I'm mostly using TRex inks. I did purchase these from Glitter Heart Co. So you can use that coupon code as well, but you can use any brand you have. I am using colors basically green, blue, purple, and like a fuchsia color, and then black. I will have the colors linked in my description below. So this is really easy. It looks complicated, but I promise you it's super, super easy. So all I did was I took my alcohol inks. I started at the bottom with the green. I'm not adding any 91% alcohol to this step yet, but I'm going in with my green and I'm applying my green all around the tumbler, and I'm overlapping that green with the black area. And I don't want it to look completely even. I don't want the line to be straight. I'm adding the color kind of in like a wavy manner. And then I'm going in with the next color, which is blue. And again, I'm not making it straight. And when I add my blue to my tumbler, I am overlapping the blue with the green just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, just to make it look more natural and make it look like Northern Lights, all the colors kind of mixing together. And sometimes the colors are going higher than the other colors. Like you see, I added the blue, it's going up high towards the black. The other blue is kind of, staying towards the middle. And then I added my pinks to the tumbler once I was finished with the blue. So that's how I wanted those colors to kind of sit, the greens, blues, and pinks and purples. And don't forget your handle. I know the handle is a pain in the butt. Make sure you add your inks on top of the handle and inside of the handle, because whenever it's finished, the tumbler is completely finished, it does look kind of cool how the design just keeps going with the tumbler. And then like I mentioned before, you see that black glitter that mixed with the white glitter. It actually turned out pretty cool, and it's already flowing with the tumbler design. So like I said, I was really happy with that. While you're adding your inks to the tumblers, don't overthink that one area is higher than the other area or it's not even. Trust me, it's all going to flow together. Once I have the inks to my tumblers, I'm going to immediately dip my brushes into my 91% alcohol, and that's going to create such a cool effect. It's like basically watercolors, and it softens some of those colors, and it really just makes like kind of circles on the tumbler, and it's really cool. So this is what's going to really make this tumbler look like the Northern Lights tumbler, and it's going to allow those colors to mix softly and those lines aren't going to be as hard. One thing I want to mention with these colors, you'll notice I'm using a lot of supplies, a lot of sponges and brushes. I am keeping my sponges separate. So the blue sponges, I'm only using one sponge. I'm setting that sponge down, and then I'm using the purple and the pink sponge. I was very careful with not mixing these colors together too much. For instance, I didn't want the green with the purple, and I didn't want the purple with the green. So if you do use the same sponge, you are going to risk mixing those colors together, and it's not going to have that nice flow. So make sure if you're adding the green inks to the tumbler, you're not grabbing your purple sponge and you're keeping the green inks. And then in some areas, if I wanted to overlap those colors a little bit more, I did apply the blue sponge to the green area just to have those colors really come together and have those soft transitions. Once I was finished adding in those colors to the white area, I went in with my TRex black. I don't know why I did this, but again, I had this image in my head. I wanted to recreate this and put this on the tumbler, and this is how the image was in my head. So I took my black ink, and if you've ever worked with any type of black ink or paint, it is so overwhelming. It takes over, and it's just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I should have just left the tumbler like this, but I wanted that, in my mind, I thought the ink would like kind of go, I don't know, it just took over. I thought it would kind of complement the cup, instead of like taking over the top and the bottom. You'll see what I mean. So I'm adding this ink to the tumbler and I'm realizing the black ink is taking over the top. I still wanted the glitter to peek through. I wanted those nice like holographic colors. So I was really disappointed that I did this and I didn't take it off, but it still turned out really pretty. So then I added that ink to the bottom, and again, it took over so much, but the idea in my mind didn't transfer to the cup, but it's okay. So if I were to do this specific tumbler again, I would just keep it with the black glitter and keep those colors, because I feel like those colors and the black glitter really complements the overall cup because the cup is so vibrant. But I did add a lot of paint to the, or I should say alcohol ink to the glitters. And then I took that 91% alcohol to kind of diffuse it, to not have it so black and so overwhelmingly on the tumbler. So you're still able to see that glitter peeking through the inks. Once I was finished applying all the inks to the tumbler, I went in with some apple barrel acrylic paint, and I'm going to add just white dots around the tumbler. These are like stars. Like if you see a lot of northern lights, you always see the white dots. It just kind of ties in the entire design. So you just need a very tiny bit of paint, and I went in right in with this paint. Right after I was finished adding the black, it was like 2 minutes later, I cleaned up my station and I'm adding the paint. I'm using the tip of the bottom of the paint brushes to add the dots, and I'm using 2 different sizes. So you can use a toothpick or anything you really have on hand to make those dots. And I wanted the dots to be like all different sizes, so that's why I chose 2 different size tips. Once I was finished with that, I let this sit and I let it dry, and then I realized I had a different vision in my head for this tumbler, and I wasn't as satisfied as I thought I would be. It's a cute tumbler, but I wanted something a little different. Again, whenever you have an image in your head and you have this inspiration that doesn't follow through with what you're placing on your cup, it just, for me personally, it bothered me. So when I was finished with this, I put down this tumbler, and of course I pulled out 2 other tumblers, and then I started to design them in a different way. So I wanted to add this in the video to show y'all 2 different inspirations and 2 different styles of this tumbler. But once you have them all together, they really do look like a group of tumblers that look the same. So again, I'm just going to show you one of the 2 because I did them both the same. I went in with my Adhesive Apothecary Ghosted, and then I went in with my glitter from Glitter Heart Co. And I'm actually using Moon Mist. This white Moon Mist glitter, oh, just no words. I don't even have to sell it. Like, look how beautiful this glitter is. It's like a color shifting, like opal, but I don't even know. It's gorgeous. So after I placed the glitter on the tumbler, I sealed it, I epoxied it, and now we're to the step to adding the inks to the tumbler. So instead of adding the black glitter to the tumbler, I added obviously all just white glitter to the tumbler, and then I decided to add the black ink to the bottom of the tumbler. So not as much, even though I made a boo-boo and it leaked to the top. But I just wanted to start adding that black glitter at the bottom and then starting to add the colors from there. The reason why I wanted to add the ink this way instead of doing the glitter is because I had more control of where the black was placed, and I had a nice transition from the black to the colors. Looking back at this, now I wish I should have placed just the black on the bottom, like the black glitter on the bottom, and then have the rest of the tumbler white, because you're going to see that I added some of the black inks up top as well, but just a little bit, just to give it that nice night sky. So again, the inspiration is just, I like these a lot better, but if I were to do these tumblers again, I would put the black on the bottom and then add the inks and then add a little bit of black ink on the top. But this is really good if you don't have black glitter, and it's really easy if you just do it this way, because you're just dumping the white glitter on the tumbler, you're epoxying it, and then you're going in with your inks. So I wanted to show y'all this way just so y'all can have a couple ideas to do these tumblers. And then when I was finished with adding the inks, I went in with my acrylic paint and then I added the dots to the tumbler as well. So for these alcohol ink tumblers, I do not seal these tumblers at all. I allow these tumblers to air dry for a minimum of 8 hours before applying my epoxy over to the tumbler. I know there are sealants that you can buy, but I've always just air dried these tumblers before applying my epoxy. The reason why I air dry is because if I go to apply my epoxy right now, those inks are going to fade and it's not going to be as vibrant as when I first placed them on the tumbler. So keep that in mind. I like to, again, wait at least 8 hours, and sometimes I just get busy and I forget to do it after 2 days. So the longer they dry and air dry, the better and more vibrant those colors are going to be on the tumbler. So the purpose for this epoxy is to just seal in this design. So you really want the smallest amount or the thinnest amount of epoxy that you can place on these tumblers. So I am using my Flint Sisters Supply Shop epoxy again. I'm using a total of 15 mLs of epoxy for each tumbler. Again, I just want these designs to be locked in because this is going to be my first, or I should say, this is my second coat of epoxy out of 5 coats of epoxy. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to add too much epoxy on your tumbler because we're going to be adding another 2 coats of epoxy to this tumbler. I did use my fast set epoxy for this part again. So this took about 4 hours to dry. If you are using your regular set epoxy from Flint Sisters Supply Shop, you would let your epoxy completely cure for at least 24 hours before going to the next step, because you want your tumblers to be completely cured before moving on to the next step, which is applying your decals to the tumblers. So I'll see y'all whenever these tumblers are completely cured. Now that my tumbler's epoxy is cured, I'm going in with my X-Acto knife again just to remove any of that excess epoxy, and then I take a sanding block and I sand around the rim of the tumbler, sanding away the tiniest bit of epoxy to expose the smallest bit of stainless steel so we can have a nice seal at the end of this process. And then I take my alcohol ink and I'm just wiping away any of the excess inks that may have been placed inside of the tumbler. The next step is adding decals to the tumbler. You can add anything you like to these tumblers. I wanted to add just pine trees. So I wanted my art to stick out more than the decals or like a quote. So I was really proud of how the designs came out. So I know a lot of people, they do a skyline of trees, like a silhouette. I wanted to add these trees individually onto my tumbler. So that's why I chose these pine trees. The reason why you need your tumbler to be completely cured before adding your decals to the tumbler is because sometimes when you add your transfer tape to the tumbler and if your epoxy is not cured, then when you lift up your transfer tape, sometimes your epoxy will lift with the transfer tape and you might mess up your tumbler, or you might create a hole in your tumbler and your tumbler will not be sealed. For my first tumbler, I wanted to add so many trees, so I added the entire tree line to the first tumbler. And then whenever I added the trees to the next 2 tumblers, I added like 6 or 7 trees just to really let the art speak and kind of not have so many trees. I got my trees from Creative Fabrica. I will have them linked in my description below. Do keep in mind, if you are using pine trees, there are some pine trees that will take forever to cut on your cutting machine. So make sure you are using the less detailed trees, or it's going to take like 30 minutes for your machine to cut just one tree. I learned that the hard way. I also sized my trees between an inch and a half and about 3 inches tall. So I just made like an inch and a half, like 2.2 inches tall and like 3 inches tall. And that's how I measured them. So how I got those measurements is I just took my measuring tape and I just measured how tall I wanted the tree to be, and I made sure to not make the tree taller than that. So I think the tallest I had was like 3.3 inches maybe. So that's how I got my measurements. If you do want your trees to be taller or smaller, just pre-measure your trees before cutting, because like I said, these trees take forever to cut, especially if you get some that have a lot of detailed with the leaves. Once all of my trees were placed on my tumbler where I want them to be, I always add my business label or logo to the bottom of my tumblers. So I added my label to the bottom of my tumblers. I do have a short on how I did these. I do make them myself. And then I just place them on the tumbler as nicely as I can place them. And then I take my quick coat from CC DIY, and that's a urethane sealer, and I place the sealer all around my tumbler where I place my decals, including my label on the bottom. So this allows the vinyl to really stick to the tumbler, and so when you apply your epoxy to the tumbler, your vinyl will not lift and your vinyl will be nice and stuck down to the tumbler. I let that dry for about 15-25 minutes max, and then I go in with my first coat of epoxy over the decals. I did 2 15 mLs of epoxy for my final coats of epoxy. So you see that I'm only doing my first coat of epoxy, so this is 15 mLs of epoxy total, so 7.5 part A and 7.5 part B, totaling 15 mLs of epoxy. I let that epoxy dry or cure, and then I went in with another 15 mLs of epoxy. So I'd rather do 2 thin coats of epoxy than 1 thicker coat of epoxy to make sure my tumbler is nice and smooth with the epoxy, so it's not like lumpy and bumpy from a thicker coat of epoxy. And for my 2 final coats of epoxy, I am using my regular set epoxy from Flint Sister Supply Shop. I never use my fast coat epoxy or my fast set epoxy when applying my final coats of epoxy to my tumblers. I also wanted to mention, if at any time during this video you heard somebody yelling in the background or beeping or loud pieces of equipment, it's because I have construction workers right outside of my window. I promise there is not a fight going on behind me. They're just working, and they must know the exact times when I'm recording and voicing over my videos. So try to ignore that part, but I promise that part is free and I'm not going to charge extra. And now back to the tutorial. Now that my epoxy coats are completely cured, I'm going in with an X-Acto knife, cleaning up the rim of the tumbler for its final time. And then I clean my tumblers with some Dawn dish soap for its final cleanup process, just to clean the inside and the outside. And then let me show you these final tumblers. And here are the final tumblers. Even that tumbler that I wasn't completely satisfied with still turned out adorable. These are going to be a hit, and I cannot wait until I make more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.